Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephany Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Changing the Face of Yoga, and this is episode 102. And I have a really interesting guest today. Her name is Anne Swanson. And Anne is incredibly busy, let me tell you. She's a yoga therapist, a mind-body science educator, and she's the author of Science of Yoga, which we're definitely going to talk about. She is part heart-based healer and part science nerd. I love that. She supports people in living happier, healthier lives by making wellness non-intimidating and accessible to everybody. Along with her Master of Science in Yoga Therapy, she has also studied yoga in India and Qigong in China. She is supporting students who have arthritis and chronic pain. She also talks to public and yoga professionals on this topic. And in her private practice, Anne specializes in helping busy people relieve pain, manage stress, and find ease through one-on-one online yoga therapy. Welcome, Anne. And is there anything else you'd like to add to that introduction?
Yeah, I've been saying that I'm a science nerd, but also a spiritual nerd. And I just really don't think those two things have to be mutually exclusive. So that's something I've been talking about a lot recently. And just, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and just, I've been doing a lot of work online. Most of my business is online now, which is super amazing to be location independent and be able to work with people all over the world. So my work has been on what I'm now calling telehealth yoga therapy.
Ah, okay. And let's explore that a little. I'm always concerned. I used to teach seniors. I'm kind of on a hiatus right at the moment, but is it like Zoom or something where you can actually see what they're doing too?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I used to teach seniors also. I worked full-time in a retirement community, or pretty much full-time with the number of classes I was teaching a week, like 30 classes per week.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was my background in working with people with multiple chronic conditions. Mm-hmm. And now, with the telehealth format, working with people in their homes, it tends to be people slightly younger than, in their 80s, 90s, and 100s that I used to work with. But I am still working with a variety of ages.
Okay. All right. I think it's really interesting that you say that you are both a science nerd and a heart-based nerd. How are you putting those together? Because what I thought was interesting is you have this Masters of Yoga Therapy and the Master of Science in Yoga Therapy, which means it's more based in the science area than the other. And you're also a certified yoga therapist. How did those two things go together, and how were they different when you had the training for both?
Yeah, I mean, my Master's of Science in Yoga Therapy is from Maryland University of Integrative Health. And I was in the first cohort of that program. It has had several since then of amazing students that are coming through that program. And it was very research-based. I mean, we read a lot of research articles that are related to yoga therapy and meditation and all the benefits and cautions. But we also did a lot of philosophy. It was really rich in philosophy, and it didn't exclude that, which is one of the things I loved most about my degree. And I don't think that, for us to intelligently apply the science to yoga, the research, basic understanding of anatomy and physiology. I don't think that means we have to take out the essence of yoga. I don't think it means it has to be cold and clinical. It still can have that sense of the tradition, of the rich philosophy embedded in it. Actually, I think it's must. And I think much of the research nowadays actually reflects that, because much of the research is doing a well-rounded yoga class that includes chanting, meditation, introduction to the philosophy like the yamas and niyamas, all of those things that teachers include in a well-rounded yoga class. That's what researchers are including in their yoga classes for people with arthritis, or chronic pain, or multiple sclerosis. So I just think that they don't have to be separate. Science and spirituality, or wwhatever word you want to use, if you're not comfortable with the word spiritual, just philosophy, a deep, rich philosophy.
Okay, so I have some experience with research, and how when you're including, that's my issue with the research, is when you do so much in so many different ways in yoga, how do you get that totality? How do you get that whole thing that comes together and does something? Yes. And so people are changing that, which is good, because it used to be very, very clinical. What is your blood? What happens to your blood when you meditate and that kind of stuff. But how are they making, what are their research hypotheses that would say, I'm going to take all of this together?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give you the example of the research of my mentor, Dr. Stephany Moonas. She did a 7-year clinical trial on yoga for arthritis, so both osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And this research was done at John Hopkins University, so a very prestigious university doing this. And what she studied was a well-rounded yoga practice for arthritis. And so, or for people with arthritis, I should say. So some of the measures she was looking at were broad measures, like what the term is health-related quality of life. And that includes a broad number of measures that are validated that look at psychological and social and physical well-being. So looking at all those aspects of self. She also looked at things that are very, very clinical and measurable by a rheumatologist, like the swelling of the joints, which was shown to go down. So those were important measures also. So being able to look at both the broad ranging measures and some of these things that doctors want to know. They don't want to tell somebody that they should do yoga. A rheumatologist wouldn't want to tell somebody with rheumatoid arthritis to do yoga if they thought it might make the swelling in their joints worse, which it didn't. This research showed that it did better. But that's not the only thing she was measuring. She was also measuring a whole plethora of things that showed a broad view of how the person's quality of life improved from that well-rounded yoga practice.
Okay. All right. They'd be huge undertakings to do all of that. Yes. And
we don't know exactly what aspect of the yoga was helping people with arthritis. We just know that yoga as a practice, as about hour and 15-minute practice 2 times a week for 8 weeks, has these effects. We know that it makes people feel better. It makes people have less pain, significantly less pain. These are really important measures in this time where there's an opioid epidemic, where the alternatives are much more expensive and complicated. If we just know that yoga itself, with all of these components, meditation, movement, breathing, relaxation, we know that that is what is helping. We don't think it's just one aspect of that. We think it's the whole practice.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's kind of segue into your book, which I love what you said was that you were basically exploring all of these things we often hear in our classes. We talked earlier, and one of the things I often would hear is, if you do this twist, it squeezes all the organs and then the blood rushes in and they get they work so much better. I always had serious doubts about that statement. But what you're doing is taking those statements that we've all heard 100 times and actually looking at the science behind them. Is that a fair explanation?
That is one aspect of my book, Science of Yoga.
Okay.
It's definitely looking at those common cues and figuring out what are the actual benefits. I mean, why are we saying bogus benefits like you're wringing out the toxins when we could say legitimate benefits like you're possibly helping to lower your blood pressure, which is an outcome that a lot of Americans and, a lot of people worldwide, especially in developed countries, are looking for right now. So I think it's important that my book covers that aspect that you're speaking of, the benefits and the cautions. But I also talk about explaining yoga for each system of the body. So how does yoga affect every single system of the body, not just the musculoskeletal? So we're looking at how does it affect your immune system by reducing inflammatory markers, something that's measurable. We're looking at how it improves your cardiovascular health, reducing the risk for heart disease, or possibly even with a healthy lifestyle, a yogic lifestyle, reversing heart disease is a possibility based off of the research. So I'm looking at all the systems of the body and explaining the research in what I think is a pretty accessible way for anybody to be able to pick up, but also things that yoga teachers should know.
Excellent. So you feel this is really, who is the audience for this book?
Yeah. So when, in discussing that with my publisher, figuring out the audience, it's a pretty broad audience. I think anybody that's, somewhat well educated, meaning you can pick up a book and figure it out. Not that you had to have had a science background. You don't have to have had anatomy and physiology, but you could figure it out with the basics. Anybody that is interested in the science, but just wants that basic introduction. And then for teachers that want a way to understand it clearly for themselves and also explain it to their students.
Okay. All right. I think that many teachers, I think I did a poll once because I was doing a thing on yoga teacher training. And the thing that most people came out of the teacher training feeling really unprepared for was the anatomy part of it. And this sounds like a really incredible addition to our knowledge because you said you go through each different system in the body and talk about what yoga does for that particular system. And I think that is almost kind of more helpful than knowing where your quads are. Because
it is.
Yeah. So
some of the most profound benefits of yoga are on these other systems of the body. I mean, yes, we're moving our muscles, but that's not the only thing that's being affected.
Yeah. And you rarely, well, at least I didn't. And I had my training quite a while ago, so it may have changed by now. I should make that qualification. But it just seemed like we learned all the muscles and the parts and stuff, but it didn't connect very well. And this sounds like a great connection that you've built about what happens when you do yoga to all of these different systems. So I think that's just a great way to look at it.
Yeah, for me, I came out of my teacher training. So first I did my first teacher training in China, and then my second one in India. So the 500 hour in India. And I came out with this real basic introduction to anatomy and biology. And I was like, wow, there's got to be so much more. I don't feel prepared to really apply this to people. Yeah. And so my way of handling that was like, well, I think to be the best yoga teacher I could possibly be, I should do something in the medical field. So I spent the next few years doing the pre-med course load, even though I had an art undergrad degree. So I did biology, chemistry, physics, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, all these sort of classes. And I started to really love anatomy and physiology and began to work in a cadaver lab and help tutor different aspects. So at colleges and then also teaching at massage schools. So for me, I've just spent years just kind of diving in, trying to fill in the gaps of my knowledge from my basic teacher training and like compile it all. And even continuing that on through my Master's of Science, yoga therapy. And I've always kept detailed notebooks. So when it came to write the book, it was like, okay, let me pull out all of my notes.
I'm impressed. I'll remember a research project or a research study, and then I'll go, oh, where is that? Where could I have? I should take
Yeah. But I really believe that this book should be in every 200-hour teacher training. I think that it gives that overview, and it helps yogis who tend to be more visual learners and kinesthetic learners, because it has the most gorgeous illustrations. I had world-class design and illustration team. And then also it applies to the kinesthetic learner because it's inviting the yogi to go into the pose and see, well, is that how I feel the muscles? Mm-hmm. Is that what I feel going on under the skin? And explore to build that body awareness or interoception and proprioception as you move through different poses. So I think it really appeals to, in this style, to yogis.
Okay. Well, we'll say this now and then we'll say it at the end, but you can get it on Amazon. Is there other places that you can get it?
Wherever books are sold. Yeah.
Yeah. Wherever. Great. Okay. That makes it much easier. Yeah.
I appreciate a review. It means a lot to a female science writer.
Okay. You said that you make wellness non-intimidating. What do you feel that wellness is intimidating to some people?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I work with a lot of people who have 5 or more chronic health conditions, and they don't know where to start. Mm-hmm. It feels like they're getting advice in all different directions. And then so many of the sources out there are saying, well, do this for this, do this pose for that. Or it gets confusing because it's not that simple. So I really feel like, especially with my work one-on-one with people, that's one of the biggest barriers I'm breaking, making it less intimidating and more sustainable for people to actually do a practice that's specific for them, that will help them.
Okay, so when you're working one-on-one online with people, is it like we're going to work for 8 weeks and I'm going to, show you some things to do for your particular unique issues? Or is it more like a class that they go to for, as long as they want to?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do one-on-one over Zoom and it's specific to that person, usually for 5 to 10 times. And then some people continue on after that. And by the end of that package, I can really give somebody a routine, and that may be poses, asanas, breath work, meditations, all the tools of yoga. And I also teach qigong and mindfulness meditation. So I use those tools and give them something that they're actually going to do. So it's one-on-one for those periods of time.
Okay. So it really is more of a package kind of thing than you're not really doing a one-on-one class for them infinitely.
Yeah, I have some long-term clients that I've worked with for years, and I really appreciate having some people that I get to know really deeply like that. But it's more like I'd like it to be sustainable for somebody to, slowly be able to see me less often.
Yeah, okay.
And them to have their own practice and maybe, just check in and update the practice as they need as their, health conditions change as they progress.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to explore this with you, would they go to your website? Would that be the way to go about it?
Yeah, AnnSwansonWellness.com.
Okay.
And you can find more about my book at scienceof.yoga.
Okay. All right. So we'll get all those at the end on the contact details again, so people can think of that. I wanted to ask you, I'll try to ask this question better this time, is you've got a certified yoga therapist and you, I assume, went through a yoga therapy program in the U.S.
Yeah, that was my master's of science in yoga therapy.
I see. So that's what it gave you at the end, in addition to the
Correct.
master's was, I see. Okay. Because I just wanted you to compare what people are learning in a traditional yoga therapy course, compared to your master of science. But that won't work because they're the same thing for you.
Kind of. I mean, the master's degree does have more hours. So in order to be a yoga therapist, it's after you have your basic 200-hour training, you can continue on and get an 800-hour training that is done over 2 years and includes very specific requirements, including a clinical practice where you're overseen by mentors working with clients. And so my master's of science at Maryland University of Integrative Health included that, but it also had more because, in order to be qualified to be a master's degree, it had a few more requirements.
Yeah. Okay. So you really have done both of those things. You have a master's degree and you also have this certified yoga therapist. Well, it's a certification. What were the really good things with that melding of those two, and what would you have liked to have changed?
Melding of my master's degree,
the master's and the certification.
Yeah, I think they're more just like one and the same, and that's what my training specifically was. But I would just say I particularly loved my training because I met so many great colleagues, and my teachers were phenomenal. And I still work very closely with Dr. Stephany Moonas of Yoga for Arthritis and Marlisa Sullivan. So really amazing teachers in that program.
Okay. That's always good to know, isn't it? To have some really great teachers.
Yeah, that's what matters.
Okay. You say, I combine science and heart.
Yes.
I think it's hard for yoga teachers, because of the way that we're taught and we're trained. What would you recommend that people who really do want to have a bit more of a background, a scientific background for what they do, what would you suggest to them, other than reading your book, of course?
I don't know if it's necessary to do all that I did, do years of training in the traditional anatomy and physiology courses, right? Hopefully in my book and in the training courses I teach, I distill down what's really important for a yoga teacher to understand. That was my intention. I wouldn't go as far as I went unless you're just super interested in it. And that's something you want to do. I think it's a constant study for both science, meaning the research, and anatomy and physiology. I'm constantly reminding myself, refreshing myself, going back to reference books, and just applying it, feeling it in my own body, and trying to constantly ask why. Back to what you said earlier about doing twists and bringing out the toxins. It's like, okay, well, the first question is why? Well, why? Okay, well, pressure on organs make them work. Okay, is that true? Or does pressure on organs bring out toxins? Those are two questions that come up for me. So pressure on your liver doesn't really do anything in particular. The liver is where toxins are processed naturally in your body. And so basically it's like, does pushing on the liver help it work? Well, no, that's not how the liver works. That's how, your digestive tract works. By twisting, you can stimulate movement in your digestive tract of the food to go through the tubes through movement and twisting. That actually makes sense. But that's not how the liver works. So, and would it really be increasing your toxin reduction? Well, I don't think so. That doesn't quite make sense. If it's not increasing the liver function, it's not going to increase the toxin reduction. And really, your body is taking care of toxins on their own. There's nothing you have to do that, right? Like that's what your body's job is. So it also means, well, that next why I have, or the next questioning I have on that cue is like, okay, well, what is a toxin? are we even toxic? Because there's something like if you go out drinking, then you have to like punish yourself by doing yoga the next day and doing a bunch of twists to bring out the toxins. Like that doesn't make sense to me, that yoga becomes this like punishment to wring out and get rid of your bad deeds, right? I think yoga is just a maintenance thing. It helps your body work at its top functioning. So all of these questions I constantly ask about a simple cue like that brings me to the conclusion that I'm not going to say something like doing a twist brings out the toxins. Instead, I may say doing a twist helps stimulate your digestion, helps move the food through in a process called peristalsis. Or doing a twist helps to lubricate your joints, helps to keep your spinal discs healthy. Let's focus on the things it actually does. You know, doing a twist helps you maintain your range of motion so that you can safely do twists throughout the day to pick things up, to move around. You know, I think that is what yoga teachers should focus on in their cueing. So that's kind of my thinking process, is like constantly ask why. That's my advice.
That was gorgeous. I love that.
Thanks.
That was great. Okay. We're almost at the end of the podcast. And is there anything that you would like to talk about in more depth that we didn't cover to the extent that you think the listeners might benefit, or something that we haven't talked about at all?
You know, I have recently, I'm trying to always keep up with research that's coming out in the field, right? It's there's so much, it's coming out so fast at a faster rate than ever. And one thing I've been really interested in, back to being a heart-based healer and keeping the spirituality in the practice, is some recent research on loving kindness meditation. So this is like something that I will teach when I teach about the science of yoga. But since this is so recent, it's not actually in my book. Mm-hmm. You know, we're going to constantly add things. So there's things I'll cover in training that I would never be able to, you know, I can't have in the book because it's changed. So with loving kindness meditation, they had several groups, and one group was told to just like walk around, you know, walk on the streets, and through the day, just observe different qualities of people's clothing. You know, that person's wearing a red shirt, a blue shirt, just this cognitive exercise. Another group was told to walk around through the day and look at people and send them loving kindness. May you be at peace. Maybe you be free. Send them this meditation. So they did that throughout the day. Now, another group was asked to walk around and look at people through the day and think how they are better than that other person.
Oh.
With each person. Yeah. And you know, the other way around, where you're walking around, which, I mean, we've all had time periods where we've had these sort of negative thoughts, and you're looking at people and you're thinking how they are better than you, right? Like, we know that that's bad for our mental health, to constantly look at other people and think, I'm worse, I'm worse, I'm worse. But the reasoning for choosing the other is the proposal that, you know, looking at people and thinking you're better is also bad for your mental health. So of course, the group that did the best that showed an improvement and a happiness measure, which we could debate that word, but, you know, just feeling more peace and happy, better mental health. The group that did the best was the loving kindness group. And the group that did the worst was the one that said that they were better than. And that makes me think, you know, when I have more the issue, not that I'm better than, but I have more the issue the other way around, where sometimes I can feel a little jealous of people, you know, and I will, when I feel that jealousy at somebody, you know, I've been trying to learn how to dance, and I'm looking at a woman that's like been dancing for a long time, like, oh, she's so good. I wish I was that good. I'm not that good. And I notice my thought like that. Or perhaps there's somebody else in the yoga field that I may be like, oh, I wish I had the career of that person. We all do this sometimes, right? Like, I have been trying to switch my thoughts to send that person loving kindness and support. It's becoming a default since I read this research study. So I guess this is just like an example of a way that we can take the science, the research that's happening in our field, and apply it. As a yoga teacher, I've been suggesting that, yoga therapist, I've been suggesting that my clients do the same when they're struggling with negative self-talk. Is that instead they send loving kindness out to others. And I explain to them that the research shows this is how it helps. And, people tend to do it more often when they see, oh, wow, there's actual research on this showing that it helps. I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah.
And that's one way that I really like to keep the heart and science together.
Okay, great. That's a wonderful example. Okay, so let's make sure that all of these contact details are available so that everybody knows, and I will put them in the show notes. The email is annswansonwellness@gmail.com. The website is www.annswansonwellness, that's all one word, .com. Facebook is Ann Swanson. Twitter is Ann Swanson Yoga. Instagram is Ann Swanson Yoga, and science of .yoga. Okay.
Yeah.
And
feel free to tag me, just to your audience, feel free to tag me on Instagram or on anything, with pictures of the book, with your thoughts, with your questions. I'm happy to discuss things. So I really love seeing those posts out there. Feel free. I'm here as a resource. Hope to talk to you all.
Yeah. And really do excellent explanations. I love the way that you explained how you would think through a cue that you wanted to think a bit more about, wanted to research a bit. I don't know. It's great. Well, thank you so much, Ann. This has been a great podcast. I love the way you think. And I think it'll open up a lot of questions and thinking among the listeners. And it sounds like that the book Science of Yoga would be a great resource for almost everyone. So thank you again for coming and talking to us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.